Hey guys! I am trying a little bit of a different background today because I'm going to see if my Wi-Fi works better over here. But I'm going to wait for everyone to join. Hey guys. I look a lot paler today because I have different lighting, so sorry for the paleness. And I did not have time to do my makeup. Sorry, sometimes I like to get a little dressed up for you guys, but couldn't make it today. I actually was able to FaceTime with a good friend who just moved out of state, and I haven't seen her in 2 weeks, and it makes me so sad. So I was FaceTiming with her. But okay, I'm waiting for your questions to come in. Oh, Emma says, I'm pulling my thyroid meds. Why? My T3 is high, but still feeling crap. Worst brain fog ever. How can I fix this? Okay, so thyroid meds don't always work very well. They can actually increase inflammation, especially if they're not taken correctly. I actually see this all the time just in clients, and also in just I hear about it all the time, via my peers and everything like that. When you're taking thyroid medication, you first have to understand that if you're taking straight up T4, your body still has to convert it into T3. If you're taking a combination that has both T4 and T3, you are still going to have to respond to those hormones properly. And so many women who have hypothyroidism also have other issues going on. There are issues that are causing you to be hypothyroid, whether that's conversion issues, but a lot of times hypothyroidism is paired with stress-based issues, right? High cortisol, high estrogen, low progesterone, which is going to be the driving factor in thyroid issues, right? And that's causing the whole gut to slow down, which then increases the toxic burden, and so on and so forth. A lot of times it begins with dysregulated blood sugar, not eating enough, not eating the proper macronutrients, or eating things that are not allowing your blood sugar to balance. Lots of chemicals, lots of genetically modified foods, things like that. So all of that to say is that so many women think, oh, I'm going to take this thyroid medication and it's going to fix all my issues, not recognizing that it's not a lack of thyroid medication that was the problem. And sometimes it's not even a lack of hormones, it's a lack of response to those hormones. Or in so many cases, I also see doctors not running a full thyroid panel that includes reverse T3. I include other hormones in thyroid panels as well, because if you say, for example, if your doctor just runs a full thyroid panel and you see reverse T3 is high, right? Okay, that's interesting. But we have to keep in mind, cortisol converts free T3 into reverse T3. Okay, so we need to know where your cortisol is at as well, right? Okay, your estrogen is low, or your progesterone is low, or your estrogen is high. Oh, we know estrogen suppresses thyroid function and progesterone stimulates thyroid function. So there we have a double whammy that's going to affect your thyroid health. It has nothing to do with the actual thyroid hormones themselves and everything to do with your whole body's response, your cellular function to those hormones. And so thyroid issues and hypothyroidism is really an oversimplified term for a whole body metabolic issue, a dysregulation of all hormones, including stress hormones like cortisol, DHEA, adrenaline, thyroid hormones sometimes, but mostly sex hormones as well. So that was a long answer for saying that some women do worse on thyroid medication. Some women don't do well on it because they're not doing all the other things that need to happen. And sometimes adding in thyroid medication is like pushing your foot on the gas when the oil hasn't been changed, when you don't have gasoline in the tank, when your tires are off of the car. That makes sense. So you're trying to push the vehicle forward, but the vehicle does not have the actual components needed to move forward, if that makes sense. Yeah, you're pushing the gas, but nothing's happening. You look great, whatever. Thanks, guys. You guys are always so understanding, and I'm like, it's all good. How did you fix your brain fog? I'm Hashimoto's and hypo. I did not focus on my diseases or my illnesses. I focused on what's causing them, which is gut issues, thyroid issues, not nourishing my body properly, not eating frequently enough, letting my blood sugar go crazy, over exercising or under exercising, making sure I'm eating enough or getting enough sunlight. I made sure that I set up my whole life and my nutrition, my day-to-day practices that I do every single hour of every single day to be body supportive. And I stopped focusing on what disease I had been diagnosed with and started actually focusing on why my body got there in the first place and what I needed to do to get back. And I hope that makes sense, you guys. It's not about fixing these individual symptoms, for example, acne or hair loss or brain fog. It's this overarching issue of what's driving these things in the first place. For example, brain fog means that some toxic proteins are probably hanging around in the brain. So are you sleeping well? Because remember, our body clears toxic proteins while you're sleeping. Or, your brain's not getting a lot of energy. A lot of times, brain fog is very present in low carbohydrate diets because your brain runs on glucose or sugar or what we call carbohydrates. So many times people are just cutting carbs thinking like, oh, I need to lose weight or whatever, and they're starving their organs in the process. So overall, it's so important to ask yourself, is my body getting what it needs day in and day out to function at an optimal level and thrive? That's the first step. And then if you really want like restoration or healing to occur, that's going to be the second step. Once your body has what it needs in the here and now, it can then focus on restoring things for the future. Hi, Severine. It's so good to see you here. What do you think about Clomid to help jumpstart ovulation? Clomid is it's not technically an aromatase inhibitor like letrozole is. It can be helpful. Like, I really have no opinion because I'm not a medical doctor. I obviously have worked with lots of clients who concurrently are working with their doctors and being put on things like Clomid and letrozole. And I've seen a wide range of observations. Like, obviously, it's not like results, but it's more like observations I've made. I think it's one of those things where it can help, but it also can't help. Like, in some cases, it doesn't help. I've seen actually like really like long-term side effects, mostly from letrozole, but also from Clomid. Sometimes it causes like thyroid issues. In some people, it makes issues like get better for a short time, but the minute like you stop taking it, it gets better. But there's some people that have seen like great results. But I personally, I think it's really important to have someone that's going to comb through your habits. What's going on? What's your day-to-day life like? Do you have mold in your environment? Are you living next to a cell tower? Are you being shot with, Wi-Fi all day long? Are you living in a building where there's like 50 different routers? And then on the other hand, what are you eating? How frequently are you eating? Are you eating enough? Making sure that you're having your whole life combed through so you know what's going on with your, what could be driving a lack of ovulation. But Clomid, medication can be helpful in certain cases. That's not to say that, we shouldn't use Western medicine as a tool. I just think sometimes it's, leaned upon a little too heavily. But I know in your case, you've been really trying to jumpstart a cycle. And so, it's one of those things where you need to really do your own research. I always recommend, if you get recommended some type of medication, what I recommend first and foremost is you go to the FDA's website and you just read through that pamphlet. Read through what the possible side effects are, everything that so you're willing to live with something if it happens to you. Because I've seen so many women that go on medications and then are not really truly aware of how it works. So you need to understand the mechanism of action. How does Clomid help you ovulate, right? You got to understand that, because what is it going to do to your body to help you ovulate, first and foremost? And then second of all, what are the possible side effects of doing that mechanism of action, right? And there's no right or wrong. Some people read the mechanism of action and they're like, whoa, I don't that's not something I'm okay with. I don't want that to happen inside my body. And some people are like, that sounds like something that would really benefit my body. So it's really about more, when it comes to medication, it's not about letting anyone make that decision for you except for you, and making sure you're completely and utterly okay with doing what that medication is going to do. And that's just really about an empowered decision, understanding and researching it. But I don't really have an opinion. I'm kind of neutral on things like that. I think if it makes sense, it makes sense. I'm on NDT and T3. Yeah, that can actually sometimes be overstimulatory. I mean, I don't know, your case. I haven't talked to your doctor. I don't know what your doctor has done, what you've been working on the side, but I've seen some people that take NDT and T3, and it's just too much for them, especially because they're struggling with other issues. driving that thyroid issue. Particularly low and high blood sugar, like blood sugar is just up and down, up and down, and up and down. They're not taking control of that. And so the NDT and the T3 actually make that worse because the cells are now uptaking way more glucose. Hi Jess, curious why so many people have diabetes now compared to years ago. Yes, so many things are blaming it on the sugar, when in fact it's so interesting to me because, 10 years ago we were blaming it on fat, right? But we had everyone switching over to trans fats and like things like vegetable oils and canola oils. Like everyone was like, oh my God, all of a sudden, even though you've eaten butter and cheese and milk and meat for thousands and thousands of years, we've had this epiphany that these fats are now very bad for us and cause heart disease and diabetes. We need to make sure you eat processed margarine, right? We need to manufacture this margarine for you and you should eat this. And so things have just gotten worse since then, right? And so now the new war is on sugar. No one has ever talked about the fact that about 80 years ago, really in the 40s and 50s, plant fats started to become a thing. They started to, we have to understand kind of what happened, the industry. So oil-based paints were huge, right? We didn't have water-based paints in the 50s. And what happened is we have to understand that the oils that were used in oil-based paints were fish oil, flax oil, and canola, or what is called rapeseed or cottonseed oil, or soybean oil. These oils stink very, very badly. If you've ever smelled oil-based paint, it is not a pretty smell, which is partially, the fumes are partially why they had to switch over to water-based paint, right? So water-based paint came out, they started using cheaper oils in oil-based paints, and where were they going to put these rancid, nasty smelling oil that oxidized in light and heat? Well, they decided, you know what, we're going to put it into the food supply. But first we got to actually deodorize and bleach these oils because they smell so damn nasty that no one's ever going to eat these things. And so they started to figure out a process to process these oils and deodorize them. And then they started to put it in the food supply. Before that, coconut oil was used in like processed foods, but mostly people ate like whole real foods. And that was the whole, you can do your own research in the 1960s, the whole Crisco campaign. It was like, stop eating lard and start eating heart healthy Crisco. And it was like, what the heck is this? And it was like the fake lard, right? And that was how plant oils were introduced. And they're cheaper. They are, to me, they're not really that much easier to manufacture. Like if you actually look into the facts, it's actually pretty harsh to manufacture. But ever since then, if you look at your great-great-grandma, like for example, my great-great-grandma, she was like this glamorous, beautiful, like lean, blonde-haired, like Marilyn Monroe type woman. And she drank Coca-Cola for breakfast, a hot chocolate for lunch, and like sugary, fatty food for dinner. And she was like so healthy. So was my great-grandfather. So was like all these people in, from, before the 50s. And then after that, like, implementing these really toxic plant fats, which we're not really meant to consume, into our lives, all of a sudden people are getting more and more diabetes, more and more heart disease, more and more strokes, more and more sudden deaths. And it's like, are we really going to blame the sugar? Are we going to blame the things that most sugary foods are not actually that high in sugar, but are very, very high in these nasty polyunsaturated manufactured oils? So I could go into it a little more, but I have a highlight story on PUFAs that you can watch that talks about like the actual biology of these fats. They're really not meant to exist in high heat or high oxygen or light environments. They are like fish oil, for example. Fish are living in cold, dark, deep water. Or nuts, they drop in the fall and they have to exist through the winter, and they sprout in the spring before the heat of summer comes. And so why do we think that these oils that only exist in the cold can function and not oxidize in our high heat environments? I don't know about you, but my temperature is 98.6 degrees. That's pretty damn hot. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to put an oil that goes rancid in heat and in oxygen, which my body's an oxygen-rich environment, into my body and expect it to do me good. And that's just kind of biology. Why do docs keep you on progesterone for your entire pregnancy? What would be the problem there? Well, if you took progesterone, I'm not your doctor, so I'm not really sure your situation, but like I'm assuming, this is just speculation, that if you were taking progesterone pre-pregnancy, you had low progesterone. Keep in mind that progesterone needs to be created by your placenta all pregnancy long in order to keep you pregnant. That's like the whole, like the body produces progesterone all pregnancy long. And so if you had to take progesterone to get pregnant, you most likely had a deficiency in progesterone, I'm assuming. And so that would make sense that your doctor doesn't want your progesterone levels to drop, which can actually result in like a miscarriage or a more difficult pregnancy. But again, that's just all speculation. What carbs would you recommend? I always recommend roots and fruits, you guys. I always say roots and fruits, roots and fruits, roots and fruits. So fresh fruit that's ripe, fruit juices that are, they're just pure fructose, or root vegetables, which are more starches, parsnips, yucca, sweet potatoes, yams, potatoes. Those are kind of my favorite, most anti-inflammatory carbs. But I also like grains that are properly prepared if your gut isn't super messed up. So sometimes it's hard to digest grains just because the gut bacteria is so disbalanced or there's a lot of inflammation, and so sometimes grains can do more harm than good. But a lot of times if they're properly prepared, a lot of people can handle them pretty well. That just means they're properly sprouted and fermented and soaked and that type of thing. You're breaking down the things that are hard to digest in grains. I'm not a huge fan of beans. I'm not a huge fan of like lentils and things like that, just because of how hard they are on the digestive system. Me personally, I just don't do well on those foods. There are people that do a little better on those foods, and I think it's like up to the person to decide, but they do have like a lot of fermentable fibers, and so if there's lots of gut issues or things like that, they can sometimes be an issue for some people. And if you're having a hard time absorbing nutrients, they are rich in phytates, which are those kind of plant compounds that are purposely put in a seed so that when that seed's sitting in the ground and the plant wants it to sprout and grow, it's going to draw all of the minerals and nutrients in the soil around it to itself, right? That's how the seed survives. But in your body, you don't want it pulling all those minerals to itself, because that means you're not getting them. And so sometimes people don't do well on like beans, grains, and seeds and things like that. Thoughts on spironolactone for high androgens? Like, I'll give you my personal opinion. I've seen it do a lot more harm than good in most women. There have been I work with mainly women with PCOS, and I've seen a lot of women be on spironolactone, and really like they're trying to get their acne down or they're trying to get their androgens down, and they're not understanding that your androgens are high for a reason. Your body doesn't just like create high androgens because it's like broken, or it's not like, oh, whoops, like, oh, I'm pumping out more androgens. There's a lot of metabolic dysregulation taking place, and so androgens, we have to remember, are protective. The only thing powerful enough to protect the tissues against cortisol specifically, so DHEA and testosterone protect your tissues from being broken down by stress hormones. Now, I'm not saying that these hormones don't cause symptoms, because they do, hirsutism, hair loss, things like that, but a lot of times women are blaming androgens for symptoms that are not being caused by androgens, and actually blocking androgens makes some of the problems worse, because now there's nothing protecting you from cortisol or adrenaline or even estrogen. So it's always a good idea to look at cortisol, stress hormones. Why is your body not getting the benefits from your progesterone? Remember, cortisol and progesterone fight for reception in the cell. So if you have high stress levels, you might be making enough progesterone, or you're not, but you're not receiving, the cells aren't responding to progesterone well. So if you don't have enough progesterone, and you're not going to block androgens at all, but if you have enough progesterone and you're wondering why it's not blocking androgens, where are your stress hormones? Because if stress hormones are high, then that progesterone might not have the effect that you desire. So overall, I think progesterone, honestly, is going to be the most powerful thing to protect against androgens more than anything else. That's my personal opinion, and I've seen it be the most effective in women. So it's like a good idea if your doctor is open to it to talk to them about it. But if spironolactone is like really truly your only option, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking it. I just think it like, I haven't really seen it be like, wow, like spironolactone has changed your life. I've had like clients where they finally like go off of it and they're like, yes, like finally I feel my liver can finally detoxify, that type of thing. Sorry, I just got to make sure. Okay, so Miss Darlings asks, I have issues with my thyroid and I have estrogen dominance and I have pulmonary hypertension. What's a good exercise schedule for running and strength training that won't cause my body stress? Well, my personal opinion is going to be that running is probably going to cause stress regardless of how much you do it or how you do it. Remember, like, your body doesn't know the difference between running from something and running for exercise or fun, right? The whole reason why endurance runners are so freaking lean is because their stress hormones are so high and their estrogen is so high. Their body is just eating through their tissues, and so they have no muscle mass and they have no body fat either, because adrenaline eats through body fat and cortisol eats through muscles. But that doesn't mean like, oh, I should like raise my adrenaline and cortisol to lose weight, because adrenaline and cortisol also block, progesterone production, which is that youth hormone. It's gonna, deteriorate the brain. It's gonna stress the liver. It's gonna stress the gut. Like, that's not how we want to lose weight. And so, in my opinion, for women, I think strength training is just so incredible. I think strength training is one of the best ways to build metabolic resilience, you guys. I'm all about the long game. I don't really care about the short game. I don't really when it comes to weight, you have to understand that like our body stores fat for a reason, and I just trust the process. Like, I'm going to strength train regardless of, what weight I am at, and I'm going to do it to build strength and to build health. But if exercise doesn't feel good, for some women who have, like, I think you said you had, estrogen dominance and thyroid issues, some women don't do well with any exercise, or some women just feel like walking is enough. And don't underestimate the power of really like low intensity exercises, because that can be really powerful too. So honestly, like, I think it's really important to kind of experiment with exercise, and I always take the approach that less is more, because so many times it is. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had women come to me that are like working out like 60 minutes a day, 90 minutes a day, sometimes even like 2 hours a day, thinking like, okay, I gotta just work this off. And we like bump them down to like 4 40-minute max training sessions a week, and they like lose all this weight and feel so much better, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, because you were forcing your body to eat itself before, and it didn't feel safe to burn very much at all, because it was like, at any point this lady's gonna make me eat myself again, and so your body has no incentive to burn what you're intaking, because it's afraid that at any moment it's going to have to start eating itself. So it's trying to save up some stores so you don't force it to do that. So overall, I think that less is more, and strength training and walking are really amazing. Why do people get fatty liver, and what to do if it first arrives? Well, I think this is really like a very complicated question. It's not like any one specific thing that causes it. It's more like what's been going on in the body. I think that it has a lot to do with the fat intake, so like lots of polyunsaturated fats, and then also like the toxins coming from the gut. A lot of people that have fatty liver also have gut issues. I just kind of like make that correlation or that observation. And I think that those toxins stemming from the gut really do burden the liver and cause some dysfunction in the liver. But check out Chris Master John's video on fatty liver. He has like a blog post and a video on it. It's really, really interesting. He's really amazing. Like, if you guys are looking for specific info on specific issues, check out Chris Master John, because he really does, like, he's a PhD, and he like really just from a scientific perspective is going to break down an issue for you. But he also is like good at putting it into actionable steps as well. It's not like, some like abstract scientific stuff. It is really like actual actionable steps, which I feel like sometimes like, and don't get me wrong, there's so many people doing such amazing work. However, like, sometimes you just like sit with someone or you hear them talk and you're just like, wow, that was a lot of information, but now I'm just like overwhelmed and really, really stressed out. And there's no like, it's okay, like, do this step and then this step and then this step. It's more just like, you're screwed, everything's screwed, like, you're all gonna be screwed. And it really can make health and wellness kind of scary, or just like become such a prison that you have no freedom. How much exercise do I recommend? It really depends on the person. I swear, you guys, sometimes I've seen women that like do really well with like one strength training session a week. For me, it changes from season to season. So I'm a hustler, I'll admit it. Like, there are seasons where I'm literally working from like an hour from when I wake up. I try to still have a morning routine regardless of how hard I'm working. Sometimes I'll work from like 8 to 8, I'll be working all day long. And on those days, I am pushing myself mentally, right? I might be a little more sedentary, but I shouldn't be like going to the gym at 8 p.m., and sometimes I don't make a break in the middle of the day to go to the gym. So it's like, I'm not going to push myself on top of those hustle days, those stressful days when I don't need to be doing that. It's not going to work for me. It's probably going to work against me, and I'm probably going to gain weight because stress makes me fat. I always prioritize sleep over exercise. So that's like kind of my rule, is if it's going to cause me to sleep less, then it's not worth it. But there are seasons of life where I'll get to the gym, 5 or 6 times a week because it feels really good to work out my body. And sometimes like when you work from home, there are days where it's like, oh my gosh, it's like my only outing for the day. Like I get to go to the gym, So it's like, it really depends on the season of life I'm in, how, where my body is at. Am I really, really stressed out? Like physically, mentally, I check in. Am I, feeling enough energy to work out? Because if I'm not, why am I going to expend energy on a workout and not have enough energy for the rest of my day? Also, there are days where like I didn't do really well to feed myself frequently, and I know that if I go work out, I'm going to be eating my own tissues. I'm not going to be, doing anything good for myself. So it really does depend on my habits of the day. I try to take care of myself as much as possible, but there are days where it's just like, oh my gosh, I didn't eat for 4 hours. So, it just kind of depends. But right now, I would say like I'm probably working out 3 times a week for 40 minutes. Like 40-minute strength training session. Maybe a little longer on some days and maybe a little shorter on other days. It just kind of depends. But not to say that that's like what's best for you, it's like it's really going to depend. But I think it's important for women to be aware and to understand that sometimes less is more. Thoughts on organic raw shea butter for skin and face moisturizer? That's what I use, girl. So I like my skincare routine is stupid simple, and there are times when it's more complicated. Like right now, yesterday I like woke up with a clogged pore on my nose, and I'm like, oh god. Like when that happens, I know like, oh gosh, I have not been taking care of my skin as good as I should. Usually every night I oil cleanse with coconut oil. So I rub coconut oil all over my face, even if I have makeup on. Use a warm washcloth to wipe it away. Sometimes if I need a double cleanse, I'll do that one more time. And then I just put shea butter on my face. That's literally sometimes all I do. Sometimes I'll put vitamin E oil underneath my eyes and on my smile lines because I'm starting to get some smile lines. Yikes. And then I'll wash my face with raw honey in the morning. And sometimes I'll re-moisturize with shea butter in the morning to put under my makeup. But sometimes I'm like, I don't want to look too oily. It depends on the day. What are your thoughts on Parasite cleansing? Well, it just kind of depends on what you're doing. I think, like, there are so many people out there, they're like, oh my gosh, I cleansed myself of all these parasites. And, they took these herbs, or they were, like, taking, like, bentonite clay and psyllium husk and things like that. And so it's, like, one of those things where I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it always does anything. Sometimes it will make you feel better for a little while, and there's people that are like, I swear by this, and really, like, what's the difference between taking a bunch of antibiotic herbs and taking an antibiotic? You might be wiping out less bacteria, but you're still kind of doing very similar things. So it's like one of those things where if it's necessary and you've fixed your metabolism, your transit time is good, and there's still something wonky going on in the gut, sometimes it can be helpful if you truly know you have a parasite. But so many people think they have parasites, and they don't. They don't have parasites. And so they have like fungus and bacterial overgrowth and low amounts of good bacteria, but they don't have parasites. So it just kind of depends on the person. But I don't know. I'm like neutral on it. I think it's just kind of like, it's not really treating a root cause. It's just maybe like another supplement to take, and it might do a little good for a little while, but it's not going to fix anything. How much micrograms of vitamin K for her 325 milligrams of aspirin? When trying to purchase it, I only see 100 microgram pills. Yeah, it's 1 milligram. Well, you would want to check with your doctor, especially if you like have a history of any type of blood thinners, or you are, you just want to double check and make sure. But like, it technically, most of the time, is 1 milligram of vitamin K for every one dose of aspirin. That's usually the recommendation, but it kind of depends on the person and the history, so it's important to kind of know for yourself. But yeah, most of vitamin K is going to come in 100 microgram pills, so if you buy it in a pill form, it's going to be very difficult to get 1 milligram, which is going to be 1,000 micrograms, or 10 of those. So I like a liquid. I like Thorne's vitamin K liquid, because you can really control the drops, and one drop is usually, I want to say 1 drop is 1 milligram, but I need to double check on that. But yeah, I like a liquid better because you can actually like control the dose, whereas like I don't want to be popping 10 vitamin K pills. Not a fan. Have you had to help someone with chronic Lyme disease, co-infections? Any advice? I was told to stay away from gluten and no high sugars. Well, here's the deal. With Lyme and other viruses, you are really under attack, I guess. It's the proper word. Like, we all have some type of virus. Most everyone has some type of herpes virus. Like, there's too many people around us. There's too many close quarters. We go to the gym. We touch things. We touch our mouths. Like, we eat at restaurants. It's inevitable, right? Viruses are spread pretty easily. And I know, Lyme's is not the same. Like, I know it's more of a tick-borne illness, but there's actually evidence coming out that it's spread by more bugs than just ticks. But it's one of those things where I always look at the whole organism, right? There's so many people that fight specific issues and focus on specific issues. Like, what can we do to kill this Lyme's virus? And I'm like, viruses stick around for a really long time. So it's better to just strengthen the whole organism so that your immune system is way more smart than you are and knows how to fight that virus way more than you do. When's the last time you studied up on how to fight a virus? Never, because you don't even know how your body fights a virus. I don't even know. We know certain things, but we don't know it all. And so to say that we know how to fight it, we know how to draw it out, we know how to kill it, that is just such a small-minded way of looking at the body, truly. So I personally come from the perspective of I don't really work on Lyme's and co-infections. I'm not worried about that so much. I'm always worried about strengthening the whole organism, right? Because I find that so many people have viruses, but why do some people succumb so easily? They're on keto, they're intermittent fasting, they're not eating enough nutrients, they're getting tons and tons of leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables that they can't digest and makes it hard on their body. They have severe gut imbalances, they have adrenal issues, they have thyroid issues, and of course your immune system's not working, duh. So it's one of those things where, and we have to keep in mind too, and I haven't talked about this a lot here, but keep in mind stress eats through the thymus gland. Stress eats your thymus gland. That's why they used to think that when they would do autopsies on older people that your thymus disappears when you're an adult. Kids have thymuses, but adults don't have thymuses. No, these adults ate through their thymus. When I say cortisol and adrenaline forces you to eat your tissues for fuel, I'm including things like the thymus gland, which is the regulator of your immune system. And so many people who do keto and carnivore, they just have to go get more and more restrictive because they eventually are eating through everything. Their thyroid's so low functioning and their thymus is so low functioning that they're not even able to have proper just baseline immunity any longer. So I don't even really truly I understand I as a practitioner and as a nutritionist, when you tell me, oh, I have Lyme's disease, I say okay, and then I say, how's your adrenals, how's your thyroid, how's your liver, how's your gut, how, what's your history? I don't, to me, that co-infection and that Lyme's is the least of your issues, because if you have an immune system that's succumbing to a virus, there's bigger issues at hand. So I hope that makes sense. It's more of looking beyond the scope of what am I fighting? That's a very Western medicine perspective, as let's focus in on this issue and not say why is my body, which should be able to fight just about anything, succumbing to a virus? It's the same thing as if you, when you're really, really stressed out, you have a herpes breakout, right? If you have the herpes virus. Why? Because your immune system is down, you're stressed, right? It's the same thing when you get sick, when you're super stressed out or haven't been sleeping well, right? Because your body's stressed out, doesn't have the fuel it needs, it's burning through nutrients quickly. And I've seen it all before, you guys. I see people that get recommended low sugar, low this, low that. I don't think you should, I think not eating wheat is a good idea because it lowers inflammation. But when it's oh, just go no gluten and no sugar, I'm no, it's a whole body issue. It's so much more than that. But sorry, that was a long explanation for something just saying like, don't focus on the virus as much as you, of course, understand it's there and acknowledge it, but focus on everything else that's overarching. Why is my body succumbing to these viral symptoms? After doing a cleanse, I started getting headaches daily, on and off for the last 3 weeks. Do you know what might cause this to happen or have any headache relief tips? Well, estrogen a lot of times can cause headaches, and then like blood sugar issues can a lot of times cause headaches. So if it's a cleanse, it could be estrogen, like you are mobilizing estrogen and now it's like coming out, or it could be the fact that like nutrients are either depleted from the liver. So like it's hard for me to know. Like I'm assuming, or I guess like kind of thinking like maybe it was too harsh of herbs, maybe the herbs cause like blood sugar imbalances, or maybe it mobilized estrogen and the estrogen is driving the headaches. Keep in mind, you guys, people make the mistake of doing cleanses where it's like an herbal cleanse, and they forget the fact that when you take liver detoxifying herbs, all of the stuff that is moving out of the liver gets dumped into the bile, which is at the gallbladder, at the top of the small intestine. So if your colon is not moving quick enough and you're dumping all of that junk that was in the liver into the small intestine, and it's not moving out, it's just reabsorbing. And so many people with thyroid issues or low metabolisms reabsorb estrogen in the small intestine very, very quickly. And so a lot of times headaches are due to estrogen. Probably the best way to go about it is my favorite headache relief is eating 2 carrots every single day. That really helps my headaches personally. Putting your feet in some hot water and putting some like ice cold peas on the back of your neck is helpful. Some women like to do peppermint oil. I've done that like a few times. I think combined with other things it's helpful. For me, Epsom salt baths really help. Saunas really help, just like getting things out as quickly as possible, because a lot of times it is a reabsorption issue. But again, that's just like my speculation. I'm not really sure what's driving it, honestly, and it could have to do with different things, but it makes sense that it's probably like something was mobilizing, but then it's just being reabsorbed by the body. And when you're on a cleanse, it's very important to make sure you're having a bowel movement at least once per day. What are your thoughts on the copper IUD? My thoughts, like my opinion on it is it's the best form of like a pharmaceutical intervention. So like opposed to hormonal birth control, it's by far, in my opinion, better, but it depends on the woman, obviously, the situation. I think it's important to know like why you're doing it, if it's just for birth control. Keep in mind that it does release copper ions. A lot of people say that there's no like copper toxicity issues, but a lot of women do absorb some of the copper in the IUD, especially if they have certain environment in their body. Keep in mind, heavy metals are really hard to control, and so if you already have like other heavy metals, they all kind of work synergistically. There have been a lot of women that I've seen that have copper toxicity due to the IUD, but that's not everybody. And the copper in the copper IUD can deplete you of zinc. So keep in mind that copper and zinc and then iron are synergistic. So it's like one of those things where no pharmaceutical intervention is going to come without a sacrifice or a cost. We have to understand that our bodies are meant to reproduce, and if they cannot, if we're inserting something or injecting something or taking something, there is always going to be repercussions, and we just have to understand what those could possibly be for our bodies. But that's not to scare you, that's just more to empower you. There's no choice that's right or wrong. It's just more like, what's right for me at this time? Where's my body at? That kind of thing. Like, there have been women that have gone on the copper IUD, no problem, nothing, it's fine, it's perfect. Like I've seen plenty of that. So a lot of women talk about how it's an amazing thing, like they don't even have to worry about it, it's fine. And then there's the flip side. So I think there's like 2 sides to every story, and I think on the internet it can be kind of scary because you type in like copper IUD, and then like most people that are like hating on the internet are going to be people that weren't satisfied with something, right? Like there's not a lot of women that are going to be like, I just want to let you guys know that my copper IUD has been like a great experience. Like most women are just going to have a great experience and like move on with their life. So, I think like, again, I'm just kind of neutral on the situation. Should avocados be avoided as they contain PUFAs? I don't really take an avoidance mindset towards any foods except for things that are like manufactured and sold as food but aren't actually consumable by humans or shouldn't be consumed by humans. So, like, for me, if I want an avocado, I enjoy an avocado, but I'm not, like, pounding avocados all the time, because they can, in some women, be, like, fat promoting. Again, it's, like, how much you're eating. Like, there's some women that are, promoting eating, like, a whole avocado every single day, and I'm, like, probably wouldn't do that, but I don't think there's a problem with, like, having some avocado every day, especially if you enjoy it. But I do see a lot of women craving a lot of avocados when they're restricting things like saturated fats and dairy specifically. So many women are like, oh my gosh, give me all the avocados. And I'm like, yeah, because you're starving for other types of fats, but your body is just getting fat from that thing. And like ghee and grass-fed butter and coconut oil and things like that. But I take a very moderate approach. If the food naturally has some PUFAs in it, for example, avocados or nuts, I don't restrict it. But I rarely crave those foods any longer once I'm like pretty nourished. And when I do crave them, I enjoy them. But I enjoy them in their whole form. A lot of people are like, I love nuts. And then they're like consuming like nut almond flour things or nut cheeses, and I'm like, no, do you love nuts or do you love things that taste like cheese or taste like this? Because if that's the case, you're not craving nuts, you're craving this, so it's like if I'm craving avocado or like guacamole, I'll eat it. But if I'm craving like something creamy and rich, I need to really check in with that craving. But overall, I don't avoid avocados, I just don't eat like a whole avocado every day. Been on NDT 2 weeks, fourth of grain, have started experiencing with being awake around 4 a.m. I do have high cortisol and need a bedtime snack, which helped before with this issue. Thoughts? Thanks. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think sometimes NDT implemented too soon, especially if you're not doing like the other lifestyle changes. If you have high cortisol, like there are a lot of times where taking NDT with high cortisol actually increases adrenaline and cortisol. So that's important to be aware of if you're still experiencing like stress-based issues like heart racing or blood sugar imbalances, low blood sugar, high blood sugar, waking up throughout the night, not sleeping well. That's something to kind of pay attention to. I think that's kind of important. And sometimes there are a lot of women who like naturally desiccated thyroid is not a good option for them. Like there have been times in my life where I don't take it. I take it intermittently when needed, but there are times in my life when I'm experiencing way too much stress that it will just like overheat my body. I won't be sleeping very well, that type of thing. So overall, it's just kind of more about self-awareness. And if it's causing more like stress-based issues, like you feel that kind of feeling of pushing the foot on the gas, but you can't go anywhere because the oil's not changed, the wheels aren't the tires aren't on the car, then maybe it's not an option, especially with such a low amount. Is bad depression and anxiety a symptom of a gut issue or a hormone issue? A lot of times both, just because hormone issues drive gut issues and gut issues can drive more hormone issues. But a lot of times it has to do with both. Yeah. There are some women, but a lot of times, like, for example, anxiety I've seen so many women who struggle with like really bad anxiety, and they implement progesterone and they immediately are like, oh my gosh, I'm such a different person. Or when it comes to depression, like one of the main things is, it's crazy to me, but just not eating enough. Like people don't realize how not eating makes us feel so dang crappy about ourselves, low energy. I guess we could call it depressed. And not to say that is all depression, because that's not the case, but so many things, like something as simple as just eating frequently and eating enough is mind-blowing for women. They're like, oh my gosh, like, wait, I just started like eating more and eating enough the past 5 days and I feel incredible, like what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, because your body has to literally start to conserve all energy before, like when it's not getting enough nutrients. Doesn't that make sense? Like it's almost like closing in on itself, withdrawing. That, we could call that depression, or, Hippocrates called it the state of melancholy. It's really just the body conserving as much energy as possible, right? And so we have to think of it in those terms. And sometimes it can be nutrients. A lot of times like B vitamins have a role, and keep in mind gut issues can cause deficiencies in B vitamins. So, they are a little bit more complex issues, but I highly recommend checking out the book called A Mind of Your Own by Dr. Kelly Brogan. I think some of the information in there is really, really helpful. I'm not like aligned with some of the supplement recommendations or the food recommendations, but I think it is a really enlightening book and an empowering book. Thanks. So yeah, I'm not metabolizing cortisol. I've taken spironolactone before, and yes, it helps my acne, but worry about taking it for side effects. Any recommendations for cortisol metabolism? Yeah. Are you eating frequently? Are you eating enough sugar? Are you eating enough carbs? Are you eating enough of the right proteins? Are you eating the right types of fats? Those are the first things. And then sometimes what's happening is if we're burning through the fatty acids that are stored in our body, like what's stored in our fat cells, that creates this vicious cycle of like PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats, are being released from the cells, and they actually cause more of a stress response. And so then they cause inflammation. And it's like this vicious cycle. Your high cortisol levels are causing you to pull more fat. And so then you're getting this those PUFAs are now creating more cortisol, which is causing more inflammation. And then, you're pulling more PUFAs. So the best thing you can possibly do is feed yourself well so you stop pulling from the stores. And stress is causing you to pull from the stores. And so many times it's polyunsaturated fats. Women are starving themselves specifically of sugar, and their body's still making sugar, right? Like it's not like, like people are like, I don't eat sugar. And I'm like, yeah, you do. The only difference is that you need stress to make your sugar. You still eat sugar. Your body still runs on sugar. You just don't feed your body sugar. Your body has to manufacture it using stress hormones. You know what I mean? So it's like seeing it different. Like, stop saying you don't eat carbs and sugar, because you do. You just make them yourself. And you're forcing your body to have to break down its tissues in order to do that. And a lot of times that's leading to metabolic byproducts in the process that are causing inflammation and high cortisol. So many women see really a lot of change when they make sure they're eating protein, carb, and fat every 2 to 3 hours, because their cells are now not being forced under duress to just like release all these free fatty acids that are driving inflammation and this kind of vicious cortisol cycle. But that's my biggest recommendation. There's no supplement that can change the way your cells metabolize hormones until you actually get the foundation, which is stop forcing your body to eat itself. That's the first thing that needs to happen. Love the story you had on SIBO today. Definitely look forward to hearing more about SIBO and gut health from you. I'm so excited, you guys. I'll definitely talk more about gut health. It really has a lot to do with metabolism, so it really ties in well. I think a lot of people take this like approach where they split like hormones and gut, or a lot of practitioners or nutritionists or other people, health coaches, talk about gut health so much, like, you gotta fix your gut. And I'm like, you can like really chase gut issues for years before you realize something else is wrong, you know? I will stick to walking and strength training. Awesome. Unrelated to health, but how old are you? You look so youthful. I'm 25, so I just turned 25 like a couple months ago. So, yeah. I honestly, you guys, it's so crazy because when I like first got diagnosed with all my issues, this was like, I started getting my issues like 8 years ago. Well, more than 8 years ago. I was put on birth control like 11 years ago. I had issues before that. But when I like actually started realizing there was something wrong, I looked like 15 years older than I do now. Like I look at pictures when I was like 18, 19, even 20, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like I look like I was 35 or even 40 then. Not to say that that's bad, but like that's crazy for a teenager and like an early 20s to look older than when you're, approaching 25 and 26. Like it's crazy. But yeah, people think I'm in high school all the time, which is really embarrassing. But partially it's because I don't wear a lot of makeup. Skin has never been worse since working with ND and detoxing this year with supplements and eating all organic and low tox lifestyle. Why would acne be getting worse, not better, when doing all you can? Yeah, because so I now know, and this has taken me a lot of research, that acne is driven by iron. So we have to see it this way, you guys. We grow up on fortified wheat products, fortified with iron. This is not bioavailable iron. This isn't like, here's an iron supplement. This is literal iron shavings put into the wheat, hoping that you might absorb it. Why? Because I don't know. And you store it in your tissues, right? Your body usually accumulates it, especially if you struggle with like chronic constipation, or if you're not eating well, or you're getting exposed to this iron every single day, right? So it's in your tissues. And you grow up eating that, or you eat it up until you're in your 20s, 30s, however old you are, and then you change your lifestyle, right? So you have all this estrogen in addition, because keep in mind, and I don't know how much of my stories you've watched or how much you understand hormones, but estrogen high estrogen in relationship to progesterone also causes your tissues to bind iron, okay? So here you are, elevated estrogen, bound iron in your tissues. You start to eat healthier. You stop consuming so many fortified wheat products. You start to do things that are going to detoxify your liver and release and raise your progesterone levels, lower your stress, which allows the body to start pulling estrogen from the tissues and detoxifying estrogen properly. Well, guess what also gets released from the tissues? Iron. And so it really depends on the history. This doesn't happen to everyone. This is why not everyone with elevated estrogen has acne. But people that have problems with storing extra iron and high estrogen almost always have acne. And it almost always gets worse when you start to detoxify, when you start to change your habits. Because this iron, and why does it come out of the face? Why doesn't it come out all over your body? Well, your kidneys and your liver can store up iron, right? And so when this iron is going through your bloodstream, being released from the tissues, your liver and your kidneys are picking it up. Your body's trying to get it out of the body as quickly as possible. But thyroid determines how quickly you can detoxify iron. So it's this whole big thing. And if it keeps going in the bloodstream, it keeps going in circulation, it does eventually get to the organ, aka the brain, in the head. But the brain doesn't store iron. The brain doesn't need much iron. So it needs to get it out. And it doesn't want to send it back into circulation towards the liver and kidneys, which are already full of iron, right? And so it needs to get it out. But you got a big fat skull around your brain that doesn't let iron out, right? So where does it come out? Base, right? So this is like, I guess, a theory that makes so much sense to me after working with so many people, because I kept seeing that like some people that have estrogen issues have acne, but some people but not everyone with estrogen issues has acne. So I was like, what is this like thing that is causing these people that have acne to have acne? And then I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and sure enough, iron and estrogen are really interrelated. And if you have excess iron, you're also pushing zinc and copper out of your cells, and so zinc and copper is needed in extra amounts to get like iron out and to get the iron out of your cells. And so it can take some time. That's a long way of saying that sometimes acne can take some time. But if you're like cooking in cast iron, or you're eating tons and tons of meat, which a lot of people like go paleo, which is like fine. Meat's not necessarily bad, but too much iron on top of like trying to get iron out can be hard on the body. So that's kind of something that I found out like pretty recently because I've been trying to figure out like one particular client that I'm just trying to figure out her acne, and she's done everything, and I'm just like, it's been like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Like, why do you still have acne? And we've been just trying to dig and dig and dig. And we have to keep in mind, you guys, like I didn't mention this part, but iron feeds bacteria. Iron feeds fungus. It feeds pathogens. That is why acne occurs. It's not because the iron is causing acne itself, but because iron is coming out of the skin and it's feeding the pathogens that reside in your skin. On top of it, estrogen also causes sebum overproduction. And so here you have this perfect environment where estrogen's causing your skin to create more oil, bacteria is eating the iron, and it's like, let's just keep going here. And you have infected pores, right? That are sometimes really deep, but sometimes more surface level. So it just kind of depends on the bacteria that's present on the skin, the microbiome. So overall, I know this like sounds very complicated, but it can take some time to get iron out of the body. And sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, getting iron-rich materials out of the diet for like a set period of time can be helpful in getting your acne to like move along, and then you can, slowly tie iron-rich foods back in after like 3 weeks or so. But it just kind of depends on the person. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So, but yeah, I know that acne can be really, really tough. Sometimes it can get worse before it gets better. Do you think caffeine is contributing to my bacne? I don't know. If you only get bacne when you drink caffeine, then maybe. But if you get bacne regardless of if you have caffeine, then that makes no sense, right? Like, if you have bacne and you're not drinking caffeine, then the caffeine's not causing the bacne. Maybe it's moving something along, but that just goes into my last point. Guess what chelates iron? caffeine in coffee. So that can also be the cause. And just because most iron comes out of your face doesn't mean it can't come out at other body parts. Like I said, it's in circulation. So it's most common for it to come out the face, but it also comes out the back. And a lot of people that have gut issues also experience acne. Can you speak a little more to sleep over exercise? Of course. Sleep is so important, you guys, for metabolic health and restoration. So I would much prefer to restore my body and allow my body time and energy to restore itself over forcing it to break itself down, right? To eat itself for fuel. And when I wake up from a night of poor sleep or I don't sleep enough, I'm going to wake up in a more stressed out state, right? My body didn't rejuvenate itself. It didn't clear out toxins or those toxic proteins out of my brain. It didn't do all of its work that it does while I'm sleeping. And so my next day is going to be very poor. I'm not going to be as thriving as I would with a really good night's sleep. And so why would I force my body into further depletion when I've already been depleted by lack of sleep? I hope that makes sense. But mostly it's just that, lack of sleep is depletion, and then so is going to be exercise on top of that. And it'll kind of be a domino effect. Like some days, I used to be like an avid over-exerciser. Like I would exercise every day regardless for 90 minutes to 2 hours. Like it was like, didn't matter how I felt. And now that I look back, it's so interesting because I was so exhausted most days. Like I didn't have the will to like do anything else well. It was just like I was expending all of my energy and all of my efforts into exercise. And it was not a beneficial thing. And you guys, like, I looked so fit then. Like no one would have guessed that I was such an exhausted human being. So that's just me to emphasize the point that even though someone has a 6-pack abs, they don't necessarily feel very good. That's for sure. Is there anything to consider regarding eating spicy foods? I love adding jalapenos to some meals and feel fine after eating them, but was wondering if there was anything to consider. I think like it's really dependent on the person. Like if people have some people have really bad gut issues and spicy foods really irritate them, but some people feel fine with jalapenos and I don't really see a problem with it. I personally love spicy foods and jalapenos and sriracha and things like that, but I'm not I don't pound those foods, but I might add some jalapenos to my tacos or put them on a salad or something like that. So I think it's kind of relative to the person, but then there are people that will eat jalapenos and it wrecks them for 3 days. So I don't think if jalapenos burn your intestines, then it's probably not a great idea. What could be causing my fingers to swell up while taking a walk on a path? I am menopausal. Sometimes it is estrogen related. Estrogen does cause water to swell into the cells. Do you have enough electrolytes? Sometimes lack of sodium or potassium or magnesium or calcium can cause swelling of the tissues. Sometimes it's just stress in general. Some people just can't even handle even a simple walk for a while because their stress is so high. So it could be a few different things, and I'm honestly not sure. But it can be hormonal, or it can just be one of those things where it is a kind of just relative to you or something that happens with you. Thoughts on stevia and erythritol? My thoughts are just kind of the biggest thing that comes to mind is just WHY. Why? I think that stevia and erythritol, the purpose is your body's craving sugar for a reason, not because it's I want the taste of sugar. No, your body's craving sugar because it needs sugar, it needs energy. So why are we going to trick our body and give it some type of fake sugar that's going to make it have that taste of sweetness and secrete insulin without actually giving our body the hit of blood sugar? So I'm neutral on those things. I don't necessarily think they're bad. I still might have a Zevia from time to time, but for me, it really drops my blood sugar quite low very quickly. Now that I understand my body a lot more, having something that has stevia or erythritol, I'm getting hungry within 30 minutes to an hour. My blood sugar's dropping so low because that's secreting insulin, and insulin is allowing more sugar into my cells. I appreciate your approach and know you're grounded in and focused on research, but I'm wondering, what do you say to the forks over knives research about animal protein being bad for health, or just vegan research in general? It's confusing, all the different approaches sometimes. I just say, like, why don't we just look at our history as human beings and our biology? All of their research is really funny because a lot of it's not, like, if you actually look at research studies, it's always like, we need to know the difference between science-based medicine and arrogance-based medicine. There's a difference, right? And if you're looking at a scientific study that made assumptions about certain things, that was based on a scientific study that made assumptions about certain things, and so on and so forth, you can have 3 generations of research studies that are based on the findings of another research study that was flawed. And so this is kind of that like weird like science culture where it's like, this research study says this. And I'm like, if anyone has never been on PubMed and searched for something specific, you'll realize that you can find a scientific study backing whatever the heck you want up. I don't look at like, oh, I'm trying to prove a point. I'm looking at, what does your body adapt to consuming? What is the modern world? What stressors is the modern world placing on your cells? I look at the fact that your body cannot extract the nutrients from plant foods properly. I know how the gut works. I know how the hormones work. I understand what nutrients you need and what you need to extract. And I'm sorry, but if you actually look at the biology, you understand that you probably can't extract what you need from plants. But that's a different discussion for a different day. Okay, guys, Instagram's cutting me off. I see the question on, have you ever heard of constipation after a coffee enema? I was going twice a day and now maybe once if I'm lucky. I'll answer that in the next live. See you in a second.